Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me here on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, and Twitter Live. My name is Makita Waterman. I am the owner of Top Writing Services Incorporated. And as you can see, every week I go over topics that I have learned through many years of healing work, inner work, a little bit of therapy for the past, I'd say about 3, 4, probably 5 years. I want to talk to you about why maybe you or people you know are suffering in silence. This is something that's very, very common due to a lot of different factors, but we're going to get into it. Before we do, I'd love for this to be a live discussion. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. If you feel that this conversation can help somebody, please send them this link, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, or LinkedIn Live. So let's get to it. First and foremost, I do believe that we have to really be honest with ourselves if we're in a position where we are settling, or let's just stick on suffering in silence. That can mean many different things to you and I. That could mean abuse that you're going through at work or in your personal love relationship. That could be suffering financially. You don't know who to go to or what to do next, so that in the new year and in this present moment, you can have a better financial existence. It can mean so many different things, but the first thing that we want to really do is accept where you are in this present moment, real time. It doesn't mean that in a minute, an hour, month, week, whatever the case may be, that things can't change, but we have to be honest with ourselves, because sometimes when we have conversations with people that we love and we don't necessarily always give them advice, but we can see that they're about to walk off of the ledge of life and maybe say or do something that they will regret, or might take them a while to recounter and get back on track from. We want to be honest with ourselves and make sure that you realize where you are right now, instead of getting defensive or thinking to yourself, this is all life. This is life. This is life is very relative. What you believe life is different from myself, but I don't believe the best way to not just be happy and live a really healthy, abundant, fruitful life and help other people at the same time is a reality consistently if you are suffering silence. So let's just be honest with where you are possibly at this time. And then we need to take accountability, because I think the pandemic era has really taught a lot of people to start looking within themselves instead of blaming society, the economy, their family, their friends, their culture, where they live, etc., and start taking accountability. And that could be hard, because you might think that maybe, let's say you're divorced, and you might think that the reason why you're in this situation where you're suffering in silence is because your marriage didn't work out. That happened in the past, but in the present moment, we have to take accountability for the mistakes that we make or the situation that we're in, whether it has been inflicted on us or not. Through my many years of coaching, I have learned that everything that we're going through, and a lot of you might not agree with this or want to hear this, but everything that we go through, whether we're walking down the street and a bird almost hits us and passes sharply past our nose, or we end up going to the mall and there's a heist in the mall and now all of a sudden the cops are there, we were vibrating on a certain level of energy or a thought process, a disempowering belief. Something within our soul or our mind has been sitting there consciously or subconsciously that is causing us to be where we are. Because once you can do that, you get out of victim mode. And once you can do that, you can then say, okay, I'm going to move past whatever anchor that someone threw into my life, or I accepted that anchor, and now it's time to move on, because it's very difficult to change your situation if you're still stuck on that person, place, or thing that had an impact as to why you are here in life. And first of all, I want to say that I feel very compassionate about your situation. I don't know any of your situations really, unless I know you personally and you're watching. But back in the day, before I started doing a little bit of therapy and healing and coaching work for myself, I often kept saying, maybe this is just how life is supposed to be. Maybe because I live in this city, this is all it's really supposed to be. And when I started getting the necessary professional help that I needed, and the questions were coming back at me, okay, Makita, why did you make that decision? Why did you go on a date with that guy? Why did you say what you said? Or why did you not say something in the moment to your boss? Is when the first step of improvement, healing, self-improvement, whatever word you want to label this entire conversation, that's when I started to realize my problems are more than other people. My problems, I have to take accountability as an adult. So I hope that comes off in a way that is going to help free you versus a way that can sound offensive, because there's no offense in taking accountability for where we are in life and the beliefs and the feelings that we attach to good and bad situations that happen in life as well. Now, you want to ask yourself, why are you suffering in silence? Because you can move past it. Now, this entire conversation, this is just a prerequisite, I would say, to really doing the work that's needed to get out of your situation. But why are you suffering in silence? Could it be that you grew up in a home and you saw your mom and or father or your caretakers or whoever you were raised with suffer in silence? Do you have cultural aspects where the women in your community tell you that you should accept this man in the dating phase before getting married? As long as he's not doing XYZ, you should continue to be with him because you've known him for 10 years. Let's be honest, everyone. There are certain cultures. I'm not saying any names. I'm sure some of you understand where I'm going with this point, is that there are certain cultures that tell not just women, but men, keep going because XYZ didn't happen, or keep going because mom and dad read your star sign, or we have an oracle, or we went to the chief in our community, the elders in our community. That's great. And I do believe that some of these external factors are great for you, but we have to ask ourselves, why are we in this situation? And you don't have to say that out loud. You don't have to put it in the comments, but ask yourself, why could you be in this situation in this moment? And try to bring it back to maybe your childhood, what you saw growing up. And also, instead of just pointing fingers at mom and dad, because mom and dad really did the best that they knew how to do, try to also answer that question with yourself as well, not just external factors. Now, are you afraid of change? Because many people suffer in silence because they think that moving or getting a new car or improving their tax bracket, income, or revenue, now all of a sudden they'll have problems. We've heard that notorious B.I.G. song, more money, more problems, right? And I don't necessarily agree with that, but we have to ask ourselves, if we change and improve, is there a fear-based belief that if we do, that it will be difficult, or we'll pay more in taxes, or we won't have any freedom, or if we become a content creator, we won't have any privacy, then we'll have to show our children. Do we really have to show our children if we're content creators, or do we have to show who we're dating or married or engaged to, or who our partner is? I don't think so. So other things that we can consider, do you have self-esteem issues? Because if in your mind, whether you realize it or not, you think that the friendship, the relationships, your finances, whatever your health status too, right? All those people on the line who have some health complications that can change, maybe with some diets, or maybe you go to the gym, or maybe you have to do a surgery. I don't know what your situation is, but are there some self-esteem or self-confidence issues attached to you continuing to live life in the limited space that you're in? And you can only answer that for yourself. Maybe you've had family and friends tell you this, like, I think you should improve your self-esteem, or what? Maybe your mom or dad might say, I didn't raise you to be this way. I thought you had a better self-esteem than that, but now you're telling me this is happening and you're accepting this. I'm trying to understand. So think about conversations that people that you trust and really have your best interest in mind, some feedback that they have given you. I'm not saying feedback in what they think you should do, or just do some reflection on, does it have to do with what you think is your value and worth in the situation that you're in right now? Now, is it time to get help? But actually, let's put that to the end. I think that suffering in silence can be very objective, but you might have this feeling as if there is nothing that nobody can do, or maybe you have tried therapy, or you've gotten an executive coach for your career, or you have worked with a life coach, and for whatever reason that didn't work out. I'm having this conversation for people on the line or who are watching or listening, that have tried. You went to your pastor, you went to your rabbi, you went to the elders in your community if you live in a very traditional village or a town, and nothing seems to work. And so maybe you're just telling yourself, maybe this is just what it is. So then we have to ask ourselves, how often were you going to your therapist? Was it once every 3 months, once a month, or once a week, twice a week, 7 times a week? I know that sounds expensive, but if you have the resources, sometimes we have to invest in ourselves if we need to see very high monumental leaps of change, right? If you were going into town and speaking to the elders, right, all the people that might be living international, and you don't have really a westernized culture, how often were you speaking to the elders? Were you asking them questions? Were you telling them the full story, or just what you think that they should hear, right? We have to take accountability to ask ourselves, if we're just we tried, but it didn't work in the time that you had, expected things to change. And I can admit to, when I started first working with my coach, it was March of 2021 is when I started working with him. And I had it in my mind that in 6 months after working with him, the problem that I had came to him to get support from would all of a sudden change. I literally, I didn't tell him, but he was swift and wise enough to understand that I had a time limit on working with him. When 6 months came, there was a lot of progress, but there was still more that needed to be worked on. And in that moment, I was upset with him. I felt frustrated, and I felt possibly, is the gig up? What's going on here? Everything's supposed to just be rosy and beautiful after 6 months of doing healing work and inner work. And that is false. One thing he taught me is we cannot put a time limit on our journey of improvement. We can't put a time limit on these things, because if you do, you're going to get disappointed if things don't pan out in 6 months, 6 minutes, 6 hours, 6 days, etc., right? And we also have to realize that when it comes to no longer suffering in silence, if you are in your late teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 90s, just remember, if you're about to do this work for the past, tens of 20, 30, 40, 50, 90 years of your life, you've been doing things a certain way. So how can we as human beings put so much pressure and shame and guilt on ourselves to improve what we've been repetitively doing on the daily, every second of the moment of the day? How could we, for the past 20, 30 years of your lives, however old, however age, young, or whatever you consider yourself to be, we can't change that in 6 months. Now, there are some scenarios, people on the line, you might be very coachable, quick learners. It might not be that deep. But for others, if you are suffering, if you really believe you're suffering in silence, I don't think it's going to take I don't know, your journey might be different. It could take 3 months, it could take 3 years, it could take 10, it could take your entire lifetime. But let's take the time frame out of it and maybe look to see, have you given up too early because that coaching or that mentorship, or maybe going to the gym for 6 months or a year, didn't really pan out to that beach body that you were hoping for, right? The other thing that we need to talk about too, with regards to suffering in silence, is that if you have family members and friends who have everything that your culture or your society says that you should have, maybe they got 2 dogs, a beautiful house, a fence, a huge backyard, couple kids, whatever, right? And you don't have that yet, and you're at a certain stage in your life. I'm not going to say age, because through my level of coaching, I don't think that is really an indicator for success to have certain things at a certain time. There are late bloomers in our circle of friends and family members. And so let's look at the bright side. You might have a really good career, but maybe you haven't found the man of your dreams yet, or the woman or the partner of your dreams yet. You might have found the partner or the woman or the man of your dreams, but maybe you're not economically where you want to be. Or maybe you have everything, but now you feel bored, or maybe you're feeling stuck, or maybe you feel you have everything, but you want more. That in itself is something that we can catch ourselves into, because everybody has a different time as to when they blossom like a flower and when they don't. But to not shame yourself, look at the beautiful things that you currently have in your life, and realize that just because your mom and your dad and your brother and your sister and your rah, 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 your neighbors had everything around the same time, or they have it, it doesn't mean that you're a loser. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. Timing, putting timing on anything, in my opinion, it's really setting yourself up for potential disappointment and giving up. So let's make that a conversation. Um, the second last thing, shall I say, that I want to talk about too, is that suffering is very, very relative. You might be a high, they call it an HSP, a hyperly sensitive person, and you know, someone else is looking at your situation, maybe someone close to your husband or your child or your best friend or your mom or your dad or your caregiver. They might be looking at your situation and saying, you know what, when I was at your stage in life, I wish I had XYZ. So how are you suffering, right? So you have to ask yourself, are you really suffering, or are you just really frustrated about what is happening in your life? Are you really suffering, or are there a couple of things that you need to change and improve, and then you'll get out of that place and space and time? So that's another way of kind of objectively looking at it. So we're down to a couple of minutes left. We also have to talk about the reality and the importance of getting help. Before I started doing therapy, which I did a while back, and the inner healing work that I've been doing for quite some time, I told myself that I didn't really know who I needed to go to. And so what I did was I consumed a lot of YouTube, podcast content, and books on self-improvement and XYZ different topics. I can admit that in some areas I was able to level up my situation without speaking directly to a professional. But then there are other things that I just couldn't get it together. And so for all of my people on the line who used to be, who are currently taking that practice of, you don't know who to turn to, you don't know if that alleged coach or that therapist, let's say it is the real deal, the person is legitimate, you don't know if that coach or that person will be right for you, you don't know if you should call them, you know, book a meeting, da da da. Let's just say that I do believe, I've said this before in my live stream, Einstein has a quote, it's not verbatim, but he said basically there's, okay, I don't know if it's Einstein, but somebody really successful said we can't get ourselves out of the situation that we were in using the same thought process that we were in before the problem started, right? Meaning there has to be some kind of a mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial shift or change for you to change that problem. And it might mean that you're not the only person that can really have responsibility for creating this transition. And you may have to take some of that money that you might have to take your children to Disney in, or some of that money that you might spend on Jordans or your hair or that cruise that you're thinking about going to next year, and invest it in yourself. I personally am not going to promote any coaches or therapists that I've worked with, that I know personally, because everybody might, you know, you might you might need to work with someone differently, but I'll just testify to say that if I hadn't started doing the work and hiring professional people to help make me accountable, make myself responsible, look into the past as to why I have done and do certain things in my life, I don't think I would be here talking to you on live every week on LinkedIn. I wouldn't personally want that responsibility because nothing has changed in my life, or I didn't make that necessary shift and transition to invest in my upgrade, level up, whatever you want to call it, glow up. Everybody has a different word for becoming a better version of yourself, right? And I do think that becoming the best version of yourself, I think it could potentially be a lifetime thing, unless you get to that place where you've worked with your coach or therapist to the point where you no longer need to pick up the phone and call them anymore. But even then, there still will be things throughout our lives that will trigger us or will impact us negatively and positively. And we still need a person that's unbiased, a person that has our best interest in mind to bounce ideas off or a thought process off before we end up walking off the career or financial or mental and emotional ledge with the way of thinking that we had before or when the problem started in the first place. So I hope this live stream is very well for all of you. Again, if you have any questions, leave them below. If you think this live stream is helpful, send them this link through LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter, wherever you're watching. And I was going to go live on Sunday, but I know that it's Christmas Eve, or at least a happy holiday for those that don't do the Christmas thing. I wanted to make sure that I jump here on Saturday to share these tips and advice with you. And I will do my best to continue to go live up until the new year, every Sunday at least, or Saturday. But just remember that no one is perfect. No one is perfect on this planet, not even the people that you put on a pedestal, or someone in your family and friends who just seems to have it all together. I promise you, if you were a fly on the wall, you would see that there's lots going on behind their closed doors, in their home, in their mind, in their heart, in their spirit that is off. And they also need work too, if they are and or not getting work. And so to move through this end of year of 2023 and onto 2024, try not to be so hard on yourself. And again, try not to put time stamps and time goals on things, because your journey might lead you to more than therapy and healing work. It might lead you to meeting people, places, and things that will guide you to where you need to be. So the shame and the blame, the guilt, or anything like that that you're putting on yourself right now, I can't tell you how to clear that out, but try not to be so hard on yourself. Everybody on this planet, no matter how wealthy, successful, good looking, well spoken they are, how many followers, everybody has work to do. It's the difference between the person that knows this and does the work, and the people or the person that does this and thinks they can do it all for themselves, and then gets gray in their hair and is like some of those older people we meet along the way in life who says, I wish I could have done this but even that statement, I wish I would have done this when I was XYZ years old, or whatever the situation is, how would that person be able to change it if they didn't get the guidance that they needed, right? So anyways, I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday, a happy New Year. You will definitely see me next Sunday or next weekend, unless otherwise. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I wish all of you the best. Yeah, see you later. Bye.